Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm really glad that you're here with me tonight, so grab your sketchbooks because we are going to talk about the top 3 glaring perspective problems that beginner artists have with creatures. These can be applied to props and characters and armor and weapons and everything, but we're specifically going to be talking about creatures tonight. So get your sketchbooks out, get your pencils ready. I'm doodling with a 4B Faber-Castell. I just like 4B because that's my favorite type of graphite to use, sketching on moleskin. So here we go. Problem number 1 is the dolly face. So you're probably wondering what that is. Let me explain. So let's doodle a face in real quick. Just some random creature. Okay, let's put some horns in, and let's say that you're thinking that you're doing a pretty good job with this face. You know, you got a pretty mean looking eye that you're happy with. You know, we're keeping everything really loose. Got a nostril. All of a sudden, problems start to emerge. You have an eyebrow. Okay? Now, you may think this is in perspective. So you just put the eyebrow in up here. Because the way that your sketchbook is tilted, you think that, oh, well, this is at an arc, this little construction line. Off here in the distance, off of the page, would be the vanishing point, correct? Beginner artists don't continue to put in those construction lines to aid their perspective. We'll put in a nostril hole, and then all of a sudden we'll put in the tip of the other nostril hole. Can you see the problems happening already? Look at the top of the mound of the eyebrow. Here's the top of the mound of the eyebrow. Here's the perspective line going into the distance, touching both of those tops. So we'll put an arrow here. Well, guess what? If we put a top in on this nose, this nostril hole, because there's the hole, there's the tip of the other nostril hole. Where's that perspective going? It's going way off into Orion's belt. Like, I don't know where it's going. When you start putting in the mouth, all of a sudden you're flattening the mouth off. So you're probably completely overlooking these issues that will compile. So we got the mouth open. Okay, let's say that we got the little cheek here. We're just doing something really basic. Let's say you got big teeth in there. Like, cool, right? What creature designer doesn't want to put big sharp teeth in there? Well, we know that these front incisors have to go in perspective, correct? So what do? We just put them in places where we think they're in perspective. See this big incisor tooth? Well, I'm going to attempt to draw it on the other side, but it's not only going to be a smaller tooth, their perspective is going to be way off. Because if I draw it way down here, guess where that perspective is going? Now, those of you that don't know who Salvador Dali was, he was a world famous artist, and his style was very unique. He made everything in his paintings look like they were melting, like they were from a dream state. Now, when you start to compile all of these, and you start to open up this mouth, okay, all of a sudden the inside of the mouth is super skinny, okay? It should be taking up a lot more space over here. What I'm going to do is I'm pointing all of these problems out, and then I'm going to redraw this in a way that is easy for you all to understand. And once you keep drawing this stuff over and over and over, it's going to become second nature, and you won't have to worry about perspective problems again. Okay, so let's open this mouth and continue this horrid perspective experiment. Okay, so let's open this mouth up. All right, first of all, inside, way too skinny already. All right, let's put a tooth in there. Let's put this tooth in there. All right, there's another problem. Look at the tip of the tooth. Look at the tip of this tooth. Let's draw the line. What happens to those lines? Oh no, there's a crisscross right there. This one is going way off into wherever. We got this one traveling way off the beaten path. This is dolly face. Everything is melted. Everything is twisted, and we don't even know where it's going. How do we draw a face that is both anatomically correct, but the perspective is correct? I'll show you. All right, so let's move down here to a clear spot. I want everybody to draw along with me now, and draw this lightly too. First, let's put in the eyeball. Okay, let's just put in something circular. All right, now let's make it a little bit more challenging, and let's put in a couple eyes. We got a big one right here for its main vision, like the creature's main scouting. And then this one down here, maybe it's more of a hunter's eye. It can see in front because, you know, predators have eyeballs located in the front of their skull so they can view prey in front of them. Herbivores and plant eaters, they have it on the side, so their peripherals allow them to look behind them in case they're being chased by something that they do not want to be chased by. But anyway, that's another lesson. Let's give it a third eyeball. Let's have some fun here. See how light I'm keeping this? Now you're probably thinking, how am I going to do an entire creature head in perspective with just 3 eyeballs? Take your pencil, and I want you to draw a very light construction line at any angle you choose. That very first line. I like to go up roughly at a 45-degree angle, because 45 degrees, it's a comfortable angle to see everything clearly and to learn quickly. Now, here's the trick. You know that in the distance, over here off of the page, is going to be a vanishing point. Not on the page. If it was on the page, we would have construction lines tightening too quickly to that point, and it would be forced perspective, and we're not doing forced perspective. We're doing realistic perspective. Realistic as in the way we as humans view objects in the real world in real time. This eyeball, I will draw a construction line through that eyeball. Now, I'm not going to make it perfectly parallel with this one, because remember, these lines will be converging into the distance to our imaginary vanishing point somewhere off in here. The cool thing about this method is that you don't have to have a ruler and you don't have to be perfect. As long as it's in the ballpark, as long as it's believable, you won't question it, nobody else will question it. Okay, let's move on. The middle of this eye, we will make this following the vanishing points. So eventually, if you look at these 3, they are converging slightly. And if we keep going, then we know in the distance they will meet. But we're not done yet. Next up, let's try to find a good space for the snout. And listen, all of you right now, especially if you're a beginner creature designer, you probably have different methods in starting a specific creature design in a specific place. All right, so for example, you may not start with the eyeballs. You may start with the nose or the ears or the teeth, whatever. I like to start with the eyes because it kind of sets the tone for everything. All right, so once I got that in there, I'm going to put the snout in. Now notice how I'm just giving a very faint outline of a rounded skull. This is a huge cranium. It kind of looks like a Pachycephalosaurus almost. The next thing that I want to do is I want to draw the center line down the head. So follow along with me, regardless of the contour of the head that you're drawing right now. Give this shape, put in that center line right here. It doesn't matter how far down you go, you can fade that off. That's okay. The next thing that I want you to do is I want you to give it the very front muzzle. Just the front lip, that's all. This is going to be crucial because we know how far that it has to go before it stops, the front of the head. Next, put in the nostril hole. See these 3 lines? These are your indicators, and these are your lifesavers when it comes to correct perspective. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to draw a construction line lightly through that nostril hole again. And it's going to converge with the rest of the lines that I started with. The reason this is important is because if we travel up that perspective line to the edge of the head, guess what? Now we know where the middle of the mound would be on top of the opposite nostril, because we can put it here. Now your nostril holes are in correct perspective. Not only that, if you decided to put some eyebrows on your creature, let's say that they're not deep set sunken in eye sockets, but they actually have some eyebrow and there's some fat tissue and thickness and everything there, where those mounds will sit on the opposite side, because all we have to do is follow this and then put the mound in right there. See how big this one is? Notice how 3/4 of this eyebrow mound is behind the line. We're going to do the same thing right there. And then last but not least, we got our little friend up here at the top of the head. So we'll just do that. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now the great thing about this method and drawing the very light construction lines going to an imaginary vanishing point is that these lines that you draw in here can cover different spaces other than the eyeballs. So for example, if we continue with this mouth slit, okay, and then let's say it has a cheekbone over here and the mouth isn't very long, like it's not a long meat-eater mouth or anything, and we decide to open the mouth up. Okay, now we know that the corner of that mouth cannot physically be seen on the other side. That's okay. But the reason this is important is because if we follow the construction lines from the corner, we know that if we had X-ray vision, the corner would show up on the opposite side. And the reason that's important is because we can start to lightly place in the other side of the jaw and how it will roll down to meet that. See, this is what beginners fail to realize, is that this curve on the outside coming up here, yeah, I could have guessed that. It's an open creature's mouth, like who cares about where it goes? But I could have drawn this line back a little bit, or I could have accidentally extended the other side of the jaw out here. But I know that the jaw needs to come right there because it lines up with the corner of the mouth on the opposite side. Okay. Now the reason I know to put the dot directly in the middle of the head, it's not a random spot behind the nose or anything. It's because you need to think of this creature's head as being rounded. Okay, and when it's rounded, that means that there's structure on the other side of the head. Always remember that. A lot of times beginner artists will draw stuff that's way too flat, and we'll get into that in a second. But if you don't want to suffer from dolly head, okay, with your creatures and they're all over the place, make sure that you do your due diligence and take your time to do this, because I guarantee you practice this method, you won't need construction lines anymore. You will have this mental library of where to put things. Now, if you watched my last lesson on how to do a creature mouth, we know how to line that up in perspective. We can still use the straight mouth technique. Okay, here's why the center line is so good. Check this out, guys. See how that center line is rounding off the front of the mouth right there? All I have to do is just draw a straight line down, and I like to put a little dot in. So what that does is it indicates to me this is how far down, the farthest down I can go for the bottom lip. And then I'll put in the chin, and voila. I have a rather realistic, kind of bulbous creature's head going on here, but it's kind of cool. I mean, we can put in some cool spikes. We can do all kinds of things. See those spikes that I put in the top of the head? Right there. Just random spikes that I'm lining up to make it look cool. Who doesn't want to put in spikes on their creatures? Well, guess what? I can follow the same method, and I can put the construction lines in here lightly, and I'm making sure that every single one is converging with all of the other lines that I put in. So I know that, oh, this tiny little spike is going to be growing over here. Oh, this next big one is going to be over here. And so on and so forth. So you know where they end up. And it It really helps because I can put down a whole layer of scales in the middle of the head and I can draw crazy stuff going on in here. And I know that if I follow these construction lines, then they'll be okay. And of course you got your teeth, you could do sharp teeth, you got your tongue inside there, teeth coming down. That's how you fix your head perspective. Okay, we're going to turn the page a little bit because this next one is going to be a lot of fun. All right. Problem number 2 in beginner perspective with creatures. Okay, it's called the overlap. Now the overlap happens, you don't even realize it's going on because you're not paying attention to it. Let's give ourselves a quadruped. It doesn't have to be one. You could do a 2-legged creature, you could do an 8-legged creature, doesn't matter. Let's do a quadruped. Okay, let's just do like this body coming across here, almost pill-shaped, kidney-shaped, I should say, like this. Okay, we're going to keep it very simple, folks. Okay, and let's do like an arachnid, okay? So let's get some joints in here. Let's say you start off nice and you have this really gnarly leg coming up there, and then you have a couple in the back. Okay, you're starting this off like a mutated beetle. Cool, right? Well, guess what? Oh, let's put one in there, just for good measure. And then the head could be out here. Okay, here's where the overlapping problem happens. The legs on the other side should never, ever, ever, unless it's direct side view, should never come down the same distance as the front legs. So let's say that this back leg right here, all right, if it's going to be in perspective, you're going to show the top of the knee, and as it's coming down on the other side of the body, you're going to stop up here, not down here. You never ever want legs to meet in the same distance or accidentally come past. This happens a lot. You see how the tip of this would be touching the ground, but the back leg should never come forward, ever. Okay, here's where the problem, or here's what the problem would look like on the creature that I'm drawing. Okay, this back leg would be coming down farther than the front leg. Don't do that. What's going to end up happening is you're going to have so many corkscrewed limbs going on, it's going to look like your creature they don't know what yoga pose to do, so they just do everything. That's what it's going to look like, and you don't want to do that. All right, now let's start putting in these joints correctly. Okay, so let's say that we want to do this big one on the other side. Now, side perspective is a little tougher because it's harder to put in perspective lines. But if you follow general perspective, the horizon line up here, vanishing points back here, okay, on the right side and on the left side, we know that as it gets closer up to eye level, those are going to be pretty much the same exact level, and it will go into the distance up here. Okay, so you got to be careful of it. But since we're shorter now, this creature is rather large, that we're going to be seeing it almost from the ground level down here. We're going to be looking up slightly. So this would be down. This would be up. You never ever want to go past the ground level. This problem probably sounds kind of confusing right now, but I want you to look at your creatures right now, especially if you're drawing them as a quadruped, more legs, 4 legs, but more so than not touching the ground, okay? If it has 1 leg, it doesn't count. Ask yourself, are the back legs, I'll shadow these in here, are the back legs accidentally coming down past this one? Our character designs, they suck really bad when 1 leg is longer than the other and the opposite side of the body, like it's not supposed to happen. So just make sure that you're watching this. You don't want to corkscrew the body. All right, and the third problem, and this is probably the biggest one, is having difficulty drawing a front 3/4 and a rear 3/4 view of your creature without it looking flat. Because beginners tend to get this angle wrong because they don't understand perspective and how things will work. So let me show you what happens, and then let me show you how to fix this. here's what happens. Let's say that you're going to draw the rear 3/4 of your creature. Okay, this is a portfolio 101 need for creature design, characters, props, anything. All right, so let's put in a little tail. And then this tail, okay, it's just a simple creature tail like this. Maybe you put some cool little spikes on it. So far, so good. Next up, you want to draw the 2 back legs, right? So let's say you have some of the hip showing. Okay, and you got some of the creature's bottom. Here's where the first problem starts. They draw the same thickness on both sides of the tail. So the angle is supposed to be rear 3/4. You're going to see more of one of the corners than the other. Okay, so for example, this hip. Another side note here. If your creature's a quadruped, beginners tend to make the leg look like a person's leg. They'll do the thigh, they'll do the knee, and then they'll do the calf. Okay, so for example, this is what it'll look like. You want to stay clear of this. Okay, they'll do this. There's the foot. All right, when it's supposed to be a quadruped. It just looks weird, and unless you're going for that, you could be. I mean, you could be doing something out of Silent Hill or Dark Souls, or I don't know. If you're doing a quadruped, you want to be careful of that. So let's say you do the back leg here. Okay, you got all the necessary tendons and everything. All of a sudden, it's really thick on the other side. Too thick almost. Okay, so what you're doing is you're forcing us to view it as if it's a straight-on rear view instead of a rear 3/4 view. You're going to see less of that hip on the left side than our right. Okay, but the problem doesn't stop there. It keeps going. Right in here, this area is very tough because you have to show what the rib cage will look like in rear 3/4. But we want to force ourselves to show what we think needs to be seen, like this. All right, so we'll draw the legs way too close, like that. So it looks like the creature is breaking right there, or squeezing so much that there's no room for the rib cage, for the latissimus muscle, for the scapula to sit, for the trapezius muscles in the back, anything to stretch along that back. Now, how do we fix that? So let's do that back leg again. Let's do the thigh. Okay, let's bend it back. All right, we got the quadricep muscles. Got some tendons. Okay, we don't have to name everything just for the sake of it. Rear 3/4, you're going to have your belly rounded right there. You're going to have very little seen in that back front leg. So it kind of looks like a horse, but not quite. So what you're going to have is that rib cage poking out. Okay, and then you're going to have the belly. Okay, and then you're going to have that hip. So you got to stay clear of the pinching going on. Okay, so let's revisit what we've been talking about tonight, the dolly face, and then we went on to work on the perspective. Okay, with the lines going to an imaginary vanishing point off of the frame. Then we have the far legs coming down way too far. They're coming down past the front legs. You don't want to do that. See the tip here? See the tip there? This leg is supposed to be in the back. Okay, so let's shade it in a little bit. And then this one's in the front, so we would shade that a little darker. That's where that's supposed to be located. And then last but not least, we have the flat effect. Okay, so we don't want to forget anything going on in there in rear 3/4. I hope this lesson was helpful for you all. These beginner mistakes. Now, if you watch my video about the mouth and then the anatomy mistakes that people do, it's correctable. It doesn't mean you're awful. It just means that you haven't seen enough of the real world and you haven't practiced enough and drawn enough bones and muscles and mixing anatomy of different animals of Earth to invent something that you think is out of this world. You will get to that point. One more thing I want to mention. since we're on legs and we're showing hips and everything. Okay, this is a little extra tip for you all. When you draw a leg, do not round the top of it. Don't do that, because you're making it look like a toy. You need to make the limbs look like they're attached to the larger body. Okay, so a way to do that is if you're going to draw the quadricep and you got your hamstring under here and you want to wrap some calf down there, this point and this point's crucial. Fade it outwards, go out this direction. Okay, now you can study quadrupeds, you can study dinosaurs. Just make sure that this looks like it belongs attached to that hip joint. Because what happens is you'll draw the top of the hip and then it's really skinny at the top. It's too much muscle and there's no hip bone. So avoid that. Thanks everybody. Comment below if you enjoyed this, if you learned anything, and I'll see you next time. Peace.